Welcome everybody to the last Fireside Chat of 2022. Thanks for joining us. And if you haven't joined us before, we've been hosting these monthly Fireside Chats ever since January, and have covered a broad range of topics from tree planting, pre-commercial thinning, forest excise taxes. We talked about estate planning last month, and if you're interested in seeing some of these past Fireside Chats, you can log on to our YouTube channel and find most of them there. We've recorded nearly every Fireside Chat this year, so I encourage you to do that. And good evening, my name is Kirk Hanson. If folks haven't met me before, I'm the Director of Forestry for the Northwest Natural Resource Group. And I'm joined by Alex Dolk, who helps with our public outreach and has been the brainchild for these Fireside Chats. And so she's going to be helping manage some of the logistics this evening. And tonight's topic is on non-timber forest products or special forest products. And we thought we'd try a little bit different format this evening. Rather than either having myself talk about this particular topic or bringing in a specialist on the topic, we wanted to turn it over to you folks and hear from people what kind of non-timber forest products you harvest from your forest. Do you harvest edible plants or medicinal plants? Have you harvested anything and sold it from your forest? Do you open up your forest for recreational activities? You can take a pretty broad definition of non-timber forest product, maybe non-timber forest service, since we're talking about recreation. Do you rent out a cottage in your forest? You know, we'll cast the net fairly wide here, and just kind of curious to know, how people are managing their forests to gain other services, products, benefits than just timber, and to kind of whet everybody's appetite and get the conversation started. I'll share one particular product, at least, that I've harvested or my family has harvested from our land. And if we don't hear from too many other people, I'm just going to keep talking then about other things that we've harvested from our forest, because this has been probably one of my favorite topics, sometimes referred to as forest farming or agroforestry, kind of a lot of different ways to look at it. But I've always been intrigued by the whole range of different items that people can glean from their forest. So let's see, 2 years ago, well, let's start back a little bit further than that. In 2018, my family bought another tract of forest land just south of Olympia. And on this particular piece of land, there was a lot of cascara. And if people aren't familiar with cascara, it's a low-growing tree, relatively shade tolerant, but mostly grows out in the open. Has an oval leaf. Oftentimes it's mistaken for red alder, but cascara has a really unique medicinal quality to it. It produces a little blackberry that within the berry and also within the bark of the tree produces a magical quality when consumed that functions as a laxative. And there's often a joke within my family that when we're sitting around the campfire, that if somebody comes along and starts dominating the conversation or is really obnoxious, that we advise them or advise somebody to give them the cascara marshmallow stick. We've actually yet to formally test this on anybody, but the assumption is that after making a few marshmallows with the cascara marshmallow stick, that this obnoxious interloper is going to excuse themselves and probably not come back for some time. But there is some truth to this. Cascara is a fairly highly sought after medicinal plant, medicinal tree. And again, the bark primarily of the tree is harvested and then dried, chipped up or powdered, and then sold to natural pharmaceutical companies. And so you can go to your local herbalist shop and buy cascara powder. You can probably find it online or find it manufactured into any number of different medicinal products. So knowing that we had a lot of cascara on our land, I contacted a local company that specializes in harvesting cascara, and they came out to our land, walked through the land, and we have about 100 acres on this particular tract. And they said, yeah, you've got plenty of cascara here to justify us sending a crew out and harvesting it, and we pay 5 cents a pound, and we'll harvest the bark, and then at the end of the process let you know how much we've harvested and pay you. And I thought, well, this is fantastic. Here's a tree that's growing in abundance. It's never really achieves timber size. It regenerates prolifically. Birds spread it all over the place. Also, when you cut the tree, say if you're to cut it at its base, it resprouts, so it regenerates very quickly. And I thought, well, this is great. We can have this crew come in, harvest the bark, and then probably in another 5-10 years or so, the trees will regenerate and repeat the process. And this might be a great opportunity for us to generate a little residual income off of our land. So I'm going to share with you just a few photos of the cascara harvesting process. And then I've got about a 1.5-minute video that I want to show you as well of the trees being harvested. Hopefully the video works. Sometimes it works on Zoom, sometimes not. And so let me attempt to share my screen here. And bear with me. Okay. Can you see a photo of somebody up in a tree?
Yep.
That's working. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So the trees that you see there with the gentleman about halfway up, that's the cascara tree. And in the foreground, you can see a tree where the bark has been stripped from it. In the back, the fellow has climbed up in the tree and is stripping the bark. So this process, first of all, does kill the above ground portion of the tree. But like I mentioned, the tree will sprout then from the base and over time regenerate itself. Oftentimes that process is referred to as coppicing. So it doesn't entirely, or doesn't kill the entire tree. It just kills the above ground portion. And so let's see here. The fellow has climbed up in the tree and is stripping the bark. Let's see if I can advance this now. There we go. A little more closer shot of him peeling the bark off the tree. And he was using a chainsaw wrench, if people are familiar with that. If you operate a chainsaw, it has a flat edge screwdriver on one end, and he just rakes that down the bark and kind of scores the bark and then peels it off the tree. This process was done in July when the sap was still running pretty heavily in the tree, and so it allowed that bark to kind of fall off the tree very quickly. I went up to one of the trees that had been recently stripped, and it was really slippery. That kind of yellow sapwood underneath there was very, very slippery. So a lot of sap running in the tree. And I've got another couple of close-up photos. This is really kind of a family operation. Also, the fellow that I was watching harvest had his 2 little boys working with him, and he would strip the bark off, drop it down to the ground, and one of his boys here then would take the bark, and as you can see in the left-hand side of the picture there, kind of nest the curled up pieces of bark inside each other and bundle it up that way. And my dream of growing rich off of harvesting cascara and paying the annual taxes didn't quite turn out like I thought. They harvested an extraordinary amount of cascara. Over 5,000 pounds came off our land, but at 5 cents a pound, that only came out to $268. So didn't even pay the property taxes for 1 year, but it was a fascinating process to watch. And I think the educational value was priceless. And more so, I thought to myself, that there was a crew that came out of about six people. I think there's at least 6 fellows and again, a couple of kids. And at least my hope was that these folks generated, a living wage off of this. So, here again is a tree that's in abundance, naturally regenerates prolifically on many sites. And, whether or not we generated much money off of it, we at least were able to, support some other jobs in the woods. I never got a chance to really ask, what these cascara harvesters were making. So I don't know, but they were out there doing it. So presumably, at least it was paying them, enough to justify this kind of work. And so for those of you that are interested in seeing what the actual process looks like, let me see here now if I can pull up a video.
Kurt,
yeah.
How many acres has cascara on it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So this particular tract of land that we have, the upland portion is about 80 acres. And so I'd say of that 80 acres, about 60 are in mixed hardwood, so alder, maple, that also includes cascara. They kind of hunted and hunt and pecked for the cascara all over on the land, but I would say they probably harvested from not much more than 15 or 20 acres or so. They missed a lot of cascara that was out there. I think what they did is I identified the kind of hot spots, where there was the most abundance of cascara and clued them into that. And I think what I'll probably do, in future years here is get back out there, GPS a little more carefully where the rest of the cascara is, and probably have them come back out and harvest a little bit more. Again, for me, there's a gee whiz factor to it. So I get a lot of distance out of gee whiz factors at times here, especially when I'm tinkering with my forest. So I'd say, I'd say 15, 20 acres, they generated that 5,000 pounds. And one of the other benefits to me, at least, or to my family for this is we had underplanted a lot of this hardwood dominated area with shade tolerant conifers, cedar, hemlock. And so by coming in and cutting the cascara bark like this, and again killing off the above ground portion, it sort of served the function of cutting those trees out and providing more sunlight down to the conifer seedlings that we planted. So instead of me having to come in and cut the cascara in order to open up the canopy, essentially by stripping the bark and killing the trees, we achieved that same function. So I got a twofer out of it. Got the trees culled out and made a little bit of money, and again supported the community. So hopefully this video will work, and you'll get a chance to see the process of harvesting the cascara. Yeah, I got to move some things out of the way here. Let's see. And is that video running?
Yep.
Great. This is just a little over a minute, so I'm not going to keep you here for hours and hours.
Have you used the dead cascara trunks for firewood?
A little bit, yep. And hopefully I didn't cause my whole neighborhood to have diarrhea, but I'm not sure if the smoke has the laxative property also.
Do you know if it would sprout or coppice faster if you then cut the dead, or the not yet dead, but like soon to be dead stems there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I've done both because I've definitely cut cascara. There you go. That's the end of the video. I've cut cascara in other portions of our forest just as part of a pre-commercial thinning dense hardwoods, and those stumps have definitely started sprouting in the next year. And like I said, that I've noticed these trees with the bark stripped also sprouting, but I guess I haven't really paid enough attention to see which is sprouting faster or growing more rapidly. It's a great question. I'll have to go back and take a look at that this next spring. So that is
a bare bones operation there. There's not a lot of tree climbing equipment apparently needed.
No, they were quite adept though. It was amazing watching them scamper. I have some other videos of them climbing up like that. But yeah, no ladder, no obviously no safety gear. Yeah. Guys got bib overalls on, rubber boots. I mean, it was incredible how agile they were and how quickly they worked. You probably heard the chainsaw in the background. So on some of the trees, so cascara, I think our biggest cascara were probably 6 to 8 inches in diameter. He was climbing one that was, maybe 6 inches in diameter. So some of the crews were actually cutting the trees down and then stripping the bark off when they were down on the ground. So they approached it both ways, stripping them in place and cutting them and stripping them. So that's one of my non-timber forest product story, and I'll share others, but I really didn't want tonight to be about all of the misadventures on the Hanson tree farm. Who else out there? Anybody else, harvesting non-timber forest products off their land, or know of other people that are?
We have just started tapping maple trees.
Oh, fantastic.
And we have quite a few on our property. And we took a course from WSU, and the leader is Patrick Schultz.
Yeah. And
we joined a group called Sapsuckers. We're quite proud of that. And in so doing, our obligation is to provide data to WSU, and in return, they outfitted us with taps and the ability to record the sugar content of the sap. And what else did they give us? Let's see, tubing and so forth. So basically, it was pretty much zero outlay. We're set to tap 10 trees. That's what the kit that they give you. So if anyone's interested, I would suggest to contact Patrick Schultz, WSU Extension. And,
yeah, that's great. And Alex just posted in the chat box there a link to WSU Extension's Sapsuckers group. So folks, if you're interested, follow that link.
It's a lot of fun. It's going to be a hobby for us, but
sure.
The only problem we have, Kirk, you've been to our property, but we're almost at sea level, and we don't get the hard freezes that you get up a little bit higher, and it's necessary to have a hard freeze and then a thaw to really get the sap going. Yeah, but we'll see. Yeah. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Maple syrup is near and dear to my heart. My family had a forest in Minnesota where I grew up, and our parents tapped the true sugar maple back there Acer saccharum, and our dad built a sugar shack and boiled down the sap there. I think it was my sister's and my job to go collect the bags of sap off the trees and bring it to him, and then he would boil it down. So I've always been interested in how our big leaf maple would produce maple syrup, and got a chance to visit a small maple syrup operation on a small woodland up along the Hood Canal. I cannot remember the gentleman's name now, but he's also part of the WSU system. But he had a vacuum tube system set up with his trees, very elaborate kind of scientific process there. But I learned from him that, producing, I guess sucking sap, tapping trees and generating the sap in the Northwest is very challenging because, like you said, Gary, there's a very limited window of time when we have the right weather conditions. And then apparently also because of our very mild climate, that once you collect that sap, you have a very short window of time, is like 24 hours or even less than, or 48 hours in which to begin boiling down that sap. Otherwise, the inherent bacteria in it begins affecting its flavor. So it sounds like a challenging, but at the same time, very rewarding process.
Are you talking about David Chiljian? Is that the forest owner?
No, I know David. No, it's another fellow yet. He's not part of our program. But his name will occur to me here at some point, probably right after we log off. But
what we're going to do is collect the sap and freeze it, and then do a big family boil off it in the spring, because we're not expecting huge volumes, and the percentage of sugar is maximally about 2 out of a big leaf maple, as opposed to 4+ on a real sugar maple on the East Coast or in the Midwest. So you get a lot of volume, but the energy involved in boiling all that volume down is significant. So we're going to try to make a party out of it in the spring.
Well, I've tried some, and it surprisingly tasted very similar to the maple syrup that we produced off the true sugar maple trees back in Minnesota. I was surprised how similar the flavor was, given, like you said, that the sugar content's different. But well, that's great, Gary. As you proceed with that, I hope you share that experience with us as well. I don't know if you're planning on doing a write-up or some videos or anything like that, but however you're able to share your experience, we'd sure appreciate that.
One of the things, Kirk, that we hope is that, so we're interested predominantly in providing data to see what's feasible here, and we think that down the road, we hope enough people are interested that some of us can be generating sap, and other people with much bigger setups like Patrick's could be boiling it down and making syrup, and we would just be the suppliers of the sap, because it's hugely labor intensive and you need a lot more equipment to make it efficient. So it's just the beginning for most of us, and we'll keep you posted as we all go along.
Sure, fantastic, great, thank you.
So are you sort of advantageously tapping, or when the weather is just right, like during the winter time then?
You need a freeze at night, and hopefully every night for a few days, and then thaw during the day. And then the tree shoots up its sap and you collect it. But if it's above freezing, the tree apparently just drips away at the sap and you can't collect enough. So it's only in the winter, and it's only during a hard freeze and a daytime thaw. On the East Coast in New Hampshire, where I grew up, it was in the spring, in the snow, and things start melting and you get the taps going on those sugar maples.
So are you waiting until those weather conditions occur and then tap the tree? Or do you tap the tree and somehow plug the tap and then, I don't know, unplug it when the weather conditions are right? Or how does that work?
The tree will try to heal itself when you tap it. So the tap is only good for about a month or 6 weeks. And so we've got another cold snap coming up next week. And we're going to pull our taps out and change the location on the tree, because this last cold snap we had wasn't enough to do anything for us.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you got to move the tap, but you don't have to move your equipment. You only move the tap just, a foot or two one way and up or down on the
I
same
see.
tree.
Okay. So
You
so
do
you're
that before it freezes?
What?
You do that.
so it sounds like then since you're anticipating a freeze next week, you'll be tapping the trees prior to that, maybe this week, and then waiting for that freeze.
Yeah, on the weekend, probably. And we've already tapped the trees. We just have to move the taps.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, fascinating. Well, does anybody have any questions about either cascara or big leaf maple syrup for the moment here? We can continue chatting about those.
Gary, have you done this long enough to where you can estimate like how many gallons of sap you get from a certain diameter tree or some metric like that?
No. Those data are available for, what was it, 15 gallons per season per tree? Something like that. You have to, it's about 80 to 1. So you need about 80 gallons to get 1 gallon of syrup. So yeah, it's.
Where do you freeze all that?
Oh, we have a chest freezer, and we're not anticipating huge volumes.
Kirk, two other parts.
Ideally, we would freeze it, and then when we run out of freezer space, boil it down. But you can boil it down halfway and concentrate it. But the big labor-intensive project is boiling it down.
Actually, there's another part of
Has
that.
anybody found any mushrooms this year? Number one. And number two, don't forget the blackberries.
Ma Hanson loves her blackberries. Absolutely. Yeah, this is a crummy year for mushrooms. I don't know about anybody else, but I got absolutely skunked on the chanterelles. The only chanterelles I found, I got really excited. We found a little patch of them, harvested them, brought them back. But there's something in the back of my mind said, there's something not quite right about this here. And before I fed my family a giant vat of chanterelle soup, I looked them up, and they were false chanterelles, which look almost identical to real chanterelles, but the false chanterelles don't have the same kind of gills underneath them. And apparently there's some debate as to their edibility. Some people say they get upset stomachs. Some people say it's edible, but not very tasty. We decided not to experiment with these and fed them to the chickens instead. So, and the chickens are fine. A raccoon ate a couple chickens later on, but that's a whole different story. So yeah, all my favorite chanterelle patches, just nothing happening. I think, we had such a dry fall, and then it got cold really quickly. So, I don't know. Yeah. Anybody else have any?
Would the chanterelles produce in the same place? So once you find them there, you can always go back to that 10 feet of forest?
Generally, so the same stand type, same forest. Yeah, maybe not literally the same location, but the same stand. Yeah, they'll keep producing roughly the same location.
It's not quite like an apple tree
Yeah,
that you can
right.
go right there and
Yeah.
that's where they produce.
So sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That's kind of the fun of looking for them, that they may pop up the same spot, or they may be 20, 30, 50, 100 feet away. But it's always the same kind of stand type and aspect, soil conditions, what have you. Yeah. I mean, there's our mailman actually has been harvesting chanterelles from the same place out on the coast apparently for a couple generations. It's his family's secret chanterelle patch, and tries I might to bribe him, he won't tell me where it is. But yeah, the same location. We'll keep producing them apparently decade after decade. Yeah, Kit.
I ate my whole crop of chanterelles today in an omelet. I got 3 little ones, and they were on the edge of the county road that's on the north edge of my driveway. And apparently somebody else saw them, because not these 3, but some slightly earlier ones that I noticed when I went out to get the mail, and then forgot about them. And the next time I remembered to look, that whole batch was gone, but there were these 3 left over, and they were delicious. But it is kind of frustrating that the people monitoring my conservation easement encountered a man wandering on my property. And he said, yes, he knew it was posted no trespassing, but he wasn't doing anything. And then he bragged about all the mushrooms he found.
Yeah. Right. Well, did you tell him or ask him where he found them on your land?
I never saw him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, your forest should be rich with chanterelles. That older Douglas fir stand, I would imagine you have them all over. Well, if we're still out there next fall harvesting for you, you know that our foresters will keeping an eye out for you. So.
Very good, and I'm very happy to share with friends.
There you go. Anybody else have any mushroom experiences they want to share of the edible variety?
I had something to mention about cascara. When
sure.
Mom and I moved here in 1956, there were quite a few large dead cascara trees. And they didn't support a coppicing at the base. They were just dead, and there were no cascara young ones anywhere near. It's been only the last maybe 10 years that there have been substantial amounts of small cascaras. So I think they must have been coming from seeds. Thank you, birds.
Yeah.
So just it's worth paying attention to whether yours really do coppice or whether they're getting killed off entirely. Maybe timing. Don't know who stripped the ones here.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know, for instance, the big leaf maple that was sprouting on our land, we very specifically had a crew come in and cut that in late summer, because the assumption is that cutting trees, and this may be true for other types of vegetation in late summer, stunts its ability or suppresses its ability to grow back the following year. So my hope is that since we cut the cascara towards the tail end of spring, that we still may get some regeneration there. But cutting later in the summer may suppress that. Well, I have a mushroom anecdote to share, mushroom cultivation anecdote. For those of you that have alder stands, red alder stands, years ago when I was a caretaker at the Wild Thyme Farm down in Oakville, John Henrikson's farm, we were interested in growing edible mushrooms. And I had learned about a technique from, I think this came from Paul Stamets, and we tried this out, and it's where you take smaller diameter alder, say 6-8 inches in diameter, and cut it at about 4 or 5 feet off the ground, but you leave the stump intact. So we refer to that as high stumping the tree. And then you come along and you inoculate that stump. In our case, we used both the inoculated little oak plugs. They're about 1.5 inches by maybe 1/4 inch plugs. And we also purchased some inoculated sawdust. And so we drilled holes in the stumps and plugged it with they were shiitake plugs, and then also cut some wedges into the stumps and packed in the sawdust. And these alder stumps produced shiitake mushrooms 2 flushes a year for 7 years, until those stumps finally just turned to mush, and we're no longer able to support mushroom production. But that's been my most successful kind of cultivation technique. I've tried inoculating logs, tried inoculating wood chips rather. But that particular technique was great, and obviously low maintenance. So for those of you that have heard about the Japanese technique of inoculating logs and twice a year dunking the logs in a water tank, I mean, to me that was just far too much maintenance. I knew I would never be able to keep up with that. But the stumps, leaving the stump intact, it continues to wick moisture up, and incredibly successful. And my other secret that I'll share with you, since I'm not giving away where my secret mushroom patch is, but same thing when we were living on the farm, we were remodeling some of the buildings, and we were taking the old sheetrock out and mulching our orchard with it. And at the same time, we were taking the wood ashes from the wood stove and spreading that in the orchard to get the nutrients from the wood ashes. And then we covered everything with cardboard as a kind of a final weed barrier, and then put wood chips on all of that. And every time we used wood ashes, the gypsum board or the sheetrock, the wood chips and the cardboard, we got morels. And morels are maybe not one of the few, but they're a nearly impossible mushroom to cultivate. You'll never find a commercial spawn for morels. The commercial mushroom producers have not figured out how to propagate, in essence, morels. But every time we use that combination of those 4 ingredients, morels would pop up along the edge of that sheetrock in proliferation. It was uncanny. I've yet to try that in my yard here in Olympia to see if it works as well. But theoretically, those spores are omnipresent out there, and when they found that particular combination of ingredients, they came up. So that's what I've got to share with you there. Anybody else have a non-timber forest product or service or any kind of anecdote? You get the gist here. We're free ranging.
Kirk, thanks for those 2 things. Would you relist the 4 ingredients for morels? Gypsum and wood ash, and what else?
Yeah, and I don't know if it matters if you layer it in the proper order or not, but yeah, so the way we did it, I think we put the wood ashes down first, the sheetrock, it's got the gypsum, calcium in there, sheetrock, and then cardboard.
Oh yeah.
And then covered the whole thing, topped the whole thing off with wood chips. And I don't remember if they were hardwood or conifer wood chips, if that made a difference. It probably did. It's whatever we got from the Asplin truck or the tree crew that would come along. So probably a mixed bag of wood chips. But those are the four items. And that was I'm pretty sure that was the layers that we put them in, if that mattered.
Wow, that's great. We'll try that. By the way, this is Jackie Gardner. I'm Gary Elmer's wife.
Yeah. No, sure. Hi, Jackie.
So we tried the alder log boring thing, fresh alder logs and bored in and put in the spores and and we even have a friend who's a beekeeper and we got beeswax to seal them up with, and we soaked them in the bathtub twice a year. And since then, I've told everybody to not buy that book because it's absolutely nothing happened. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you know, we have a lot of now, especially after storms, we have a lot of standing stumps in our alder forest. I think we'll go through and try it again with your system, although I hate to patronize him for the spores because I'm so mad at him about the logs, but maybe it's a good idea. It's absolutely worth a try.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I've tried all that also with both alder and maple, and what I found is that the bark just fell off really quickly. And I think once the bark falls off, the cambium, layer dries out, and that's where all the nutrients are that the mushrooms, the mycelium, are feeding off of. So yeah, had a little bit of success with inoculated wood chips in our garden. From Fungi Perfecti, you can get these 3 mushrooms. They're called the 3 amigos, and I can't remember. It's a King Stropharia, lion's mane, and I think a type of oyster mushroom. There's a number of different types of oyster mushrooms, and I think the only one that came up of those 3 were, I think we maybe got a few King Stropharia popped up in the garden one year, but I don't know, fun to try with. Well, anybody else? Who else? Anybody harvesting any medicinal plants from their forest, or other edibles besides Ma Hanson's blackberries? Come on, you are.
Well, I know I found some nettles. I did not harvest them. I didn't find them on purpose.
Sure.
Does anybody have any sources for places that are looking for herbs like that sourced, or wild plants?
They're looking like to buy them or to use them?
Yeah.
Boy, I don't know. I mean, some of these things are so common that yeah, I don't know if people are looking for places to go harvest them. In particular, like the nettles, they're obviously pretty common out there.
Oh no, I meant places that would buy them if I harvested some.
yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know. In Olympia, for instance, I mean, we have an herbal shop downtown, Radiance Herbs. And I went and talked to them one time. I think it was about the cascara, to ask if they are interested in buying it, but they already had, they're reliable suppliers. But maybe worth checking if depending on where you live, if there is an herbal supply store, or even posting on good old fashioned Craigslist if you harvested and dried them. My family harvests them every year. We dry them and save them in a jar, make tea out of it. We mix it into soups. We've made pesto out of nettles, just replacing the basil with the nettles. Lots of different ways to use nettles are just fantastic. Eating them raw. I'll have to show you my special technique for eating them raw. That's whenever I take kids in the woods.
Yeah.
So I'd have to demonstrate it, explaining it. I'm going to send you off. I'm sure to your demise. But if you take the leaves and very carefully with your thumb, you can push the little spikes that are on the leaves,
just like knock them down.
Knock them down, and do that on both sides. And if you do that subtly, so the kids don't notice it, then you take the leaves and you fold it in on itself, because I think it's just the underside mostly that has those spikes.
Yeah,
you fold it in on yourself, and then you can pop it in your mouth, and kids' eyes get really big. And then you tell them not to try this at home, which I don't know. I'm not very good at demonstrating things that kids shouldn't do. But.
I find if you have a lot of saliva in your mouth, that helps neutralize them, and then you don't, and then you chew it differently than you normally do.
Yeah, very, very nimbly.
Yeah.
You're not inspiring a ton of confidence. Either of these descriptions were not very detailed.
Well, actually, I don't know how detailed this is, Alice, but we have that video on our YouTube channel where I think I harvest some nettle and
You
do that
do,
and
but
eat
you're
it?
very vague in that video because I watched it trying to figure out what you do, and it's very vague about how you don't get stung when you're like brushing.
Mysterious, not vague, mysterious.
Well, maybe we'll have to do a close-up video of that because
Yeah,
or
and
keep
Scott
it
will
keep
need
it
a
mysterious.
we'll need a camera that is like inside Scott's mouth.
And then we go snipe hunting.
Yeah, indeed. Come on, there's got to be something else that people are harvesting out there.
Well, I have a specific question for
Sure,
people.
sure.
Does anybody have experience with truffles or truffle hunting or inoculating for truffles in your fir forest?
I tried it once on our land in Oakville. I got some truffles from somebody that had harvested them down in Oregon. But I kind of came to learn later that in Washington, it's a lot more difficult to grow truffles because we're just a lot wetter. That they do best in some of the drier foothills in Oregon. You've got the Oregon black truffle. But yeah, I don't know anybody in Washington who has successfully grown truffles. So I suspect that it's going to be a rare microclimate where you can do that.
I learned from writing an article for NNRG a while ago, talking to some truffle hunters, that they are finding them more in like Douglas fir plantations, interestingly. Like less natural forests even. I also learned that you can train any dog to be a truffle hunter. It's kind of a funny story. They are a couple owns a woodland and they got interested in truffle hunting and they ended up adopting something Campagnolo, which is like the premier Italian breed that does truffle hunting, and they trained it and it did really well at competitions. And then they ended up adopting this like mutt breed, some sort of a golden retriever lab mix or something. And it's gone to all these truffle hunting competitions and just won first place in every one. So you can train any dog to be a truffle hunter, apparently.
That's fantastic.
There's some kind of a shrub or herb, and not herb, a bush that florists use. And I can't remember what it's called. It's real prolific. But does anybody ever buy them, or are they just so much available? But they use them at the flower shops. Anybody can think of what I'm trying to think of?
Is that Salal?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the kind of oval leaf.
Yeah,
very dark green. Yeah.
Because where do the forest shops get them? Because they're in a pretty prolific in plants. Or
yeah, they
From my, I was
Please
going to
get-
say, from the man who picks the huckleberry and salal brush at my place, packs it very nice, cleans off the bad leaves, and then he has a brush shed where he buys from other pickers, and then he sells it to wholesalers who sell it to florists. So it's a serious big business. And the one time I took a fancy cruise, a Holland America trip, where were we? Some in the Mediterranean at that point, I think. And they flew in Salal from Amsterdam so that they could do the very fancy bouquets on the ship. So the British call it lemon leaf. It's considered a beautiful ornamental. And it can pay for the taxes.
when we first bought our property in Coyle, there is a large amount of Salal, and I looked into the possibility of selling it to florists at Pike Market or other places, and I learned what I think somebody said about nettles or something earlier today, that that there is a market. It's very it's labor intensive, and you need pounds and pounds and pounds of it to make any money at all. And there are specialized cutters who come out with pickup trucks and will fill a pickup truck in a period of time. But it's a difficult thing to make money off of on your own, apparently. And the wholesale market doesn't yield, or did not at that time yield. But as you say, every time I buy a bouquet from Costco, it's absolutely loaded with Salal. So or anywhere else, it's very, very prevalent. So they're coming from somewhere, but we decided not to pursue it. We actually thought it'd be a great thing to keep our grandkids busy, but it didn't work.
Well, I picked huckleberry and salal when I was in high school, while my friends went to Puyallup and picked strawberries. I think I had the better job in terms of how my back reacted.
Sure.
Yeah, you're right, Jackie. It's a scale issue that I found with a lot of those floral greens. The a huckleberry, sword fern, salal, that, and I'm not sure what the minimum acres you need, but in talking with some of the harvesting crews, you need usually a couple hundred acres, and they typically harvest that from the larger industrial timber landowners who have thousands of acres. We've looked at providing brush leases, selling brush leases on some of the larger forests that NNRG manages, but these are up to the 2,000 acre kind of scale, where that's a lot more viable. So on a 40 acre scale, 100 acre scale, it'd be pretty challenging to be able to attract a floral green harvester.
The Forest Service also sells permits, so people can go, and I don't know quite how they decide where do they go, but you're competing with the Forest Service.
Yeah, speaking of that, kind of a side note, I've always heard that you can get a Christmas tree permit to go harvest a Christmas tree from the National Forest. Never done it, but this have you? That's great. Yeah, I've never done it. So this Thursday is my daughter's birthday, and she always likes to go hiking in the old growth. So I checked online, and we got ourselves a $5 Christmas tree permit from the Olympic National Forest. So we're going to go for a hike and hopefully find ourselves a Christmas tree at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was $10, so you got a deal.
Yeah, I thought it was 15.
Which office did you go to?
Yeah. Online.
Probably depends on the forest. Yeah, we went a couple of years, or 2 years in a row, last year and the year before, and we had a really hard time finding non-hemlocks. So we ended up coming home with a hemlock, which shed its leaves immediately, like 4 weeks before Christmas. So I ended up drilling a bunch of holes in the stem, picking fresh Douglas fir boughs from outside and sticking them all the way to the top.
That's awesome.
You gave it hair plugs.
Yeah.
Hair plugs.
One funny non-timber forest product that my dad has dabbled in a little bit is owl puke. There are people who come and collect owl pellets, like the regurgitated pellets that owls regurgitate, and they have bones in them. They will pay to collect those, and they're used in like middle school science classes. And my dad owns 10 acres in Whatcom County. Someone just walked up his road one day and was like, "Can I look through your forest for this?" And he ended up finding some. And I just Googled it to see if you can like find these people, and I don't know if they're advertising, and I didn't find anything, but there's a cool Washington Post article about the business. I don't know if anybody's done that.
I can attest to the fact that they get used in schools. I vividly remember dissecting an owl pellet when I was in school.
Neat.
I was
Well, we got a
wondering
couple of-
about the carbon credits,
Mhm.
Yes, with some
selling those, if anybody had, I've looked at a few, most of them want bigger than like 40 acres and want long term commitments, but I did find one that was like, your minimum, there was no minimum, so 1 acre and you could do it for 1 year. I don't know how that works. But that's what
Yeah, the only one that I've looked into, and I know right now they're not selling, is a company called NCX, like Nancy, Charlie, Xavier. And that's the way they operate also, is they purchase, and it's a deferred harvest credit. So if you're not planning on harvesting timber in a particular year, you can sell a deferred harvest carbon credit. Not worth a whole lot. We ran some calculations for one of our properties, 30 acres, and I think it amounted to maybe a couple $100 or so. But again, if that's annually, that almost pays the property taxes. But there are a few other programs out there for small woodland owners. I forget their names now, but I think if you try Googling that again, I don't really know what the search term would be, but small woodlands carbon offsets or something like that. You should find them. I just heard about 2 or 3 programs like that sell these short-term contracts, so you're not locked into a 100-year contract as you would be if you're selling through the California carbon registry. That's a very rigorous, and that's where you do need to have hundreds of acres. We've sold some carbon projects through that, but that's on properties that we manage that are a couple thousand acres. So for those of us that have 20, 40, couple hundred acres, you need to look for these other companies that do the annual. And that's not really a lease; it's just again, a deferred harvest credit. So they're out there, but I don't know anybody who's done it. So I can't provide any verification of that it's worked or how well it's paid, but they're definitely coming. And if you're in Washington State also, last year the state legislature, I always forget the name of the bill now, but Washington State now is creating a cap and trade system, and within that legislation specifically is a provision to purchase carbon offsets from small woodland owners. So I would imagine they're in the rule writing process right now, and I would imagine within the next 12 to 18 months we'll start seeing some news about that.
What was the initials?
NCX, Nancy, Charlie, Xavier. So look up NCX Carbon, and they're going through they're revising their program right now, so you can learn about it on their website. I think you can enroll your land, but they're not currently purchasing carbon offsets. And I'm not sure when they're going to come back online. But well, folks, it's 8:32, and I think out of respect for everybody, hey, this was a lot of fun. This worked out great. I was hoping to have just a fun, informal conversation for our last fireside chat of the year. I'm not 100% sure yet if we're going to continue this into 2023. Alex and I will put our heads together and see if we have funding to continue to support this. I've had a blast over the past 12 months, bringing in different speakers, talking myself about a few different topics, hearing from everybody. It's been I think a really fun format. So I hope we can continue this, but I wish you all a happy holidays. Thanks for joining us, and look forward to seeing you all in the new year. So thanks, and have a great night.